Stalingrad, 1942. Among the twisted ruins of a shattered city, death approached not with the roar of artillery, but in silence. Hidden among debris, behind broken walls or camouflaged in rubble, Soviet and German snipers fought a brutal war of their own. One shot, one kill. In this video, using the latest technology, unique wartime aerial imagery and rare eyewitness testimony from both sides of the wire, we'll for the very first time locate, identify and retell the true story of the most famous sniper duel in history between Vasiliy Zaitsev and the enigmatic Major Erwin König. Born in 1915 in the Ural village of Yeleninka, Vasiliy Zaitsev was raised by his grandfather Andrei, a hardened hunter who taught him to track and shoot with a single-shot Berdan rifle, making every bullet count. He eventually joined the Soviet Navy in 1937 and was stationed here in Vladivostok. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941 in Operation Barbarossa, Zaitsev and his fellow sailors immediately volunteered for the front. But it was not until mid-1942, when the Germans reached the Volga in Operation Case Blue, that the young Navy clerk would finally get an opportunity to see frontline service with the beleaguered 62nd Army right here at Stalingrad. Stalingrad, today Volgograd, was then and is now an industrial city, stretching around 25 kilometers along the western bank of the Volga River and dominated by its major factory districts. As we see here, the city has been largely rebuilt and has expanded since the war, with these areas being post-war additions. But by turning to historical records and several remarkable aerial reconnaissance images taken during the battle, we can understand its geography a little better. The heart of the fighting would take place around these three major factories: the Red October, the Barricadi and the Tractor Factory. Then to the south there was the city's petroleum refinery and the Lazur chemical plant, colloquially known, due to the existence of this rail loop, as the tennis racket. And just here to the west was found perhaps the most critical strategic position, dividing the northern and southern parts of the city and giving a perfect view of all districts and the river, Hill 102, the famous Mamayev Kurgan. Today it's home to the imposing Motherland Calls statue. Our story takes place not far from this point, close to this area, which in 1942 was a residential housing district for many of the city's factory workers. By late summer that year, the enemy was at the gates, and urgent reinforcements were needed to stem the tide. Finally, in this darkest hour, Zaitsev and his comrades were granted their request and were transferred to the Red Army's 284th Rifle Division, with Vasily himself appointed as a warrant officer overseeing distribution of messages and orders to the units within his battalion. After a month-long train ride through Siberia, by mid-September the 284th finally arrived here on the eastern banks of the Volga, to be met by the apocalyptic sight of Stalin's city ablaze in a hellish inferno. On the evening of the 22nd of September, the division made a night crossing of the Volga, following this route to eventually land right here and enter the devastated city. They were immediately ordered south, towards the heavily contested area of Mamayev Kurgan and the Dolgi Ravine, where they engaged the Germans in ferocious bloody brawls for small positions which caused both sides horrendous casualties, but especially the new arrivals. Brutal close-quarters fighting went on for days, with Vasily himself receiving a wound to his leg and then a German bayonet in his back, which came within inches of ending his life. And that was just the beginning. The real bloodbath erupted in mid-October when the Germans launched a major attack here in the northern sector, pushing the Soviets back and squeezing the pocket against the river, which by now was running red with blood and black with oil. Battles were raging all along the line, and Zaitsev and his comrades found themselves pinned down by a German machine gun in this area near the Dolgi Ravine. Now the Siberian hunter dropped his submachine gun in favour of the good old Soviet Mosin Nagant rifle. His target was hundreds of meters away, on the high ground atop the Mamayev Kurgan, spewing a torrent of fire at the men hiding in the ditches. Vasily adjusted the iron sights on his rifle and peeked out of its cover. He took a single shot at the German gunner, and the infamous Hitler's buzzsaw fell silent. The two assistant gunners then took over the MG42 and resumed firing, only to be silenced again and again, one after the other, by a single bullet each. Watching this unfold from another frontline position was none other than the division's commander himself, Colonel Nikolai Batchuk. Nicknamed Bulletproof Batchuk for his constant, dauntless presence on the front line with his men, he was impressed by the marksman who silenced the Nazi machine gun. He demanded to know who it was and for him to be made a sniper. Although snipers were present in most infantry battalions at the time, they were regarded as something of a relic of the previous war, associated with the static and attritional meat grinder in the trenches and no man's land. But the battle in the bombed-out urban wasteland of Stalingrad would prove to be just such a meat grinder, and snipers were about to make their mark in a manner unsurpassed before or since. After months of what resentful Soviet soldiers considered unfair battles on the open steppes, where the German panzers and air power would outmaneuver and annihilate the ill-equipped Red Army formations, finally, at Stalingrad, there was an opportunity to strike back. Many riflemen, spurred by patriotic fervour, simply ventured out into the bombed-out landscape as would-be snipers and hunted the Germans on their own accord. One man was Alexander Kalentiev, who initiated the so-called sniper movement, which spread through the ranks like wildfire and garnered a lot of attention from the Soviet press, even though most of the men involved were amateurs and not trained snipers. Zaitsev himself was one such man. He recalled,
I followed Sasha Kalentiev around for 3 days and learned from him. That was my sniper education. Later, when I was made to start a sniper school with my own recruits, I was in reality both a teacher and a student. I still had much to learn myself.
Nevertheless, these amateur snipers were beginning to exact a heavy toll on the Germans and thereby gaining valuable experience. Zaitsev had already scored several dozen kills with his non-scoped rifle and was starting to gain a reputation. Ilya Ehrenberg, the famous writer for the army's newspaper, The Red Star, wrote,
From now on, the very word German ought to cause gunfire. We shall not speak, we shall kill. Unless you've killed at least one German in a day, your day has been wasted. And if you have killed a German, kill another one. Kill the German, thus crush your motherland.
Grueling battles continued in the city with no respite until the breaking point had been reached, when there was a breakthrough in the industrial district and the Germans reached the Volga, barely 100 meters from the army's headquarters here near the Barricade factory. There on the 16th of October, Bulletproof Batchuk had brought his star sniper, Senior Warrant Officer Zaitsev, to be decorated by the army commander in person. He received a medal for valor, but the commander, General Vasiliy Zaitsev, was not in a good mood. He, a man of iron will, was becoming weary. His decimated army was barely holding on to this narrow strip of land by the Volga, and it had to keep doing so, cost what it may. Zaitsev later recalled,
Zaitsev said by defending Stalingrad we have tied down large enemy forces. How could we ever look our countrymen in the face if we retreated now? I felt that the general was directing his question to me, so I answered him, Comrade General, for us there is no land beyond the Volga.
Chuikov loved Zaitsev's stoic reply. At once he'd ordered it to be printed everywhere and spread to the troops. The 62nd Army, battered, bruised and barely hanging on, also loved its new motto, no land beyond the Volga. Even more so because it was coined not by an officer or a politician, but by a fellow soldier. Vasiliy Zaitsev was now the army's star celebrity, and in the following days, Chuikov will present him with a proper sniper rifle, a Mosin Nagant model 1930 with a PEM sniper scope with a 4 times magnification. This formidable rifle was capable of striking a target of up to 800 meters distance, where at 400 meters it landed a shot on a human-sized target with almost 100% precision. Many German snipers, such as the second top-scoring German ace of the war, Josef Zepp Allerberger, even preferred it to the standard-issue Mauser 98K. Vasily, now with a proper sniper rifle, became an even more lethal hunter. Soon he would be ordered to pick several candidates that he would mentor and teach how to become snipers, just like Kalentiev had mentored him. These students of his would become known as the Hares or the Rabbits, a play on Zaitsev's last name, which in Russian literally means the hare. Vasily was not thrilled to be given this task though. He was still coming into his own and learning, while the companies in his battalion were already down to barely 20 fighting men each. So when he returned to the aid station to have his still troublesome wounds dressed, he took a chance to look for possible candidates among his blood-soaked and shell-shocked comrades. Then he spotted a wounded soldier who was wearing a sweater and a pair of fancy officer's boots he took from a dead German.
It was Mikhail Ubazhenko, my first student. "I can still fight," he said to me. I told him I wanted to stay. I liked his attitude. His head was bandaged and his hands were shaking, but his injuries had not rendered him useless. He could have easily opted to be evacuated across the Volga, but he chose to stay and fight.
Zaitsev took him out to a building where he had a pre-made sniper's nest with a perfect line of sight on Mamayev Kurgan. Vasily spotted a group of Germans digging and gave the sniper rifle over to Ubazhenko. But when he was about to shoot, Vasily stopped him.
"Keep aiming at his chest, but don't shoot yet." "But why not?" "Think of it like a game of pool. With every shot you are also trying to establish your next shot. If you shoot him now when he's turned towards the ditch, both him and his shovel will fall inside and that will be the end of it. But if you wait for him to turn to the other side, your shot might just cause him to fall on the open ground. Now that way, if his body tries to reach for him or his shovel, you can get him too."
Ubazhenko obliged and followed his instructions, and after just a few moments, Vasily observed through the binoculars. Ubazhenko had hit his target, and furthermore, to his delight, the situation was indeed unfolding exactly as he predicted.
Just seconds later, some idiot reached out from the trench and tried to retrieve that shovel. Bang! Another shot and he dropped straight back into it. "Vasya, 2 fritzes! I nailed 2 fritzes!" "Nice shooting. Now let's get out of here before someone else nails us."
Zaitsev taught his students the intricacies of the sniper's craft. He taught them to be patient and carefully select their targets. Killing an officer or an artillery spotter could be incredibly damaging to the enemy. Even if there was no one else to shoot but common soldiers, he told them, make sure to aim for the one with the medals. Killing the bravest one among them will certainly break the courage of the whole unit. Or, as the top-scoring German sniper ace of the war, Matthaus Hetzenauer eloquently put it,
"The proper utilization of the sniper is not reflected in the number of kills he racks up, but in the effect that his work produces upon the enemy unit."
Unsurprisingly, the Germans reacted to the mass appearance of the Soviet snipers by sharply increasing the number of their own. A typical German sniper, a Scharfschütze, was armed similarly to his Soviet counterpart. A special version of the standard issue rifle, in their case a Mauser 98K, with an optical scope sporting a 4 or 6 times magnification. But of all the German snipers in Stalingrad, one stood out from the rest. One chilly evening in late October, a German prisoner was brought into headquarters for questioning. In a cheerful mood, Colonel Batchuk informed Zaitsev that the German High Command was greatly alarmed at the damage being inflicted on their troops by the Soviet snipers, and especially him. So much so that they had allegedly brought in a certain Major Erwin König, the head of the Berlin sniper school, with a special task to, as the German captive put it, hunt down the Russian rabbit.
"This major is going to be a child's play for our boys, eh, Zaitsev?" "Of course, Comrade Colonel. Easy meat."
Vasily replied, but in truth he was tired and concerned. He had been killing, on average, 4 or 5 Germans a day so far, but he had also seen many of his fellow snipers killed and knew that his luck could not last forever. It was likely on the very first day of November, in the early morning, when the regular call came in for his snipers. Fritz's at the spring. There was a small spring which trickled down the Mamayev Kurgan, from which the equally exhausted Germans were filling their canteens with fresh water each morning. But on this day, when the pair of Zaitsev's hares, snipers Morozov and Shaikin, answered the call, they were ambushed by a German sniper, a superb marksman. One of them was wounded, and the other had his scope shattered by a well-placed bullet which nearly killed him. There was no doubt in anyone's mind. That was him, the elite German sniper from Berlin. And so, on the following morning, the 2nd of November 1942, Vasily was to engage in the duel of his life. He picked one of his best students and the finest sniper in his group, Sergeant Nikolai Kulikov, to assist him in the coming fight. That day, the two of them set out and crawled up to the area where Morozov and Shaikin had encountered his nemesis the day before, and waited.
The day drew to a close and we noticed nothing out of the ordinary. All of a sudden a helmet rose into the view and moved slowly along the German trench. Shoot? No, it's a trap. The bobbing of it was unnatural. That's his assistant carrying it, while he waits for me to fire and betray my location.
They remained lying still for the whole day until nightfall, when they retreated under the cover of darkness.
Where could that damned cur be hiding? No clue. What if he's not even there anymore? Something is telling me that he is. A skillful sniper like that would be patient. I'm sure he could sit there for a whole week if he had to.
The second day came and passed in much the same manner. Zaitsev and Kulikov methodically observed every single piece of terrain in front of their position in case they spotted something unusual. Even the smallest change in scenery could bring the sniper's attention to that spot and death to an enemy, if he was indeed hiding there. But there was nothing. On the third day, the battalion commissar Danilov came up to the forward positions. He observed something right in front of their position, peered slightly out of the trench and yelled out to the snipers.
There he is! Look at my hand! I'll point him out to you!
Danilov fell back into the trench, wounded, but Zaitsev failed to spot where the bullet came from.
Only a top sniper could have made that shot. To fire a shot so quickly and with such precision, that must have been him.
Hours passed and Vasily grew frustrated.
He had to be somewhere right in front of us, but where? For days I've been peering into my scope, studying their front line, making notes and drawing diagrams. I've taken notice of every crater and every mound of earth, but nothing that seemed suspicious. Where the hell is he? He vanished from the face of earth.
He and Kulikov once again began the tiresome and methodical process of fully sweeping the area through their scopes, slowly moving from left to right.
To the left, a knocked out tank. Is he there? No, too obvious. An experienced sniper would never position himself there. A pillbox to the right? No, he wouldn't hide there either. And the embrasures are all sealed shut.
But then he noticed something. Between the tank and the pillbox, right in front of the German trench, in no man's land, there was a sheet of metal and a pile of bricks laying on the ground. It was way too low to the ground for someone to be hiding underneath it, but what if? It was day 3 of the duel when Vasily took an interest in that particular spot.
I had been laying there in exactly the same manner since we first came to this position, so I've been ignoring it. But now that I've seen it again, I've started contemplating. What would I do if I was him? What would be my ideal hiding place? How about digging a little foxhole underneath that shit? Just enough to fit a man, but the shit remained in place and therefore raised no suspicion. And they could sneak in and out at night. Yes, that's where he is.
Vasily moved into the trench where Danilov was shot and prepared a decoy, hoping to prove his suspicions correct. He raised it on a wooden board, peering out of the trench. The German fired again. Zaitsev checked the decoy. The bullet pierced it from the exact angle he'd expected.
Nice, we've got him. There's our Viper. Now we've got to lure him out, just the tip of his head. He won't fall for this again today, but no matter. He's not going anywhere. He won't leave that good of a position. He doesn't know we are onto him.
On the next morning, probably the 5th of November 1942, Zaitsev and Kulikov moved back into their positions for the final showdown. So, with the scene set, where exactly did this duel take place? To answer that question, we first need to ask what we know about the situation. 1. Zaitsev received a scoped rifle on the 21st of October at the earliest, and so the duel could not have occurred before that date. 2. November the 8th was the last sunny day of the year, after which there was constant overcast, rain, snowfall and frozen ground, so it couldn't have happened after that. 3. We know that Zaitsev at the time was embedded with the 1047th Rifle Regiment, who were fighting in this area between the Mamayev Kurgan and the Lazur chemical plant. 4. Zaitsev himself refers to entering the factory workers' housing district, right here. 5. We know from archival records that the Soviet front line ran exactly across this location and that the corresponding German line was approximately here. 6. We know that in this area was found a wellspring, which Zaitsev referenced as the incident that initiated the duel. And 7. According to Zaitsev's own recollections, they could not engage the enemy during the early part of the day as the sun would blind them. Knowing this is crucial, as when combined with this modern simulation of the sun's trajectory on that date, we learn that they must have been orientated with Zaitsev and the German sniper on a northwest-southeast axis. And by examining the entire front line passing through the area, there is only one place in which all of those factors combine, and that is right here. So by blending out the historic shot and bringing in the modern satellite view, we can see, perhaps for the very first time, the exact ground across which this famous duel took place, today much changed and a somewhat unassuming spot. Let's return to the historic image and hear from Zaitsev himself.
After midday, we were completely in the shade, while his position was being directly illuminated by the sunlight. And just like that, something glimmered right at the edge of the sheet. Kulikov immediately put his helmet up as a decoy and slowly raised it, just like a real person would, and in the manner that only the most skillful sniper could convincingly mimic. Bang! Kulikov fell to the ground and pretended to cry loudly. The German must have thought, finally, I've got that Russian rabbit. And he stuck his head up just for a moment, just a little bit above that shit. Bang! I pulled the trigger and the Nazi's head simply sank.
Later that night, there was fighting all along the line and Zaitsev and Kulikov crawled up to the sheet of metal. They uncovered it and found him, the Nazi super sniper. They quickly collected his documents and his sniper rifle and brought them back to headquarters to Colonel Bachuk for examination.
I knew you boys would catch that bird from Berlin.
He congratulated them and confirmed the identity of the slain enemy as Major König. To the victor went the spoils. Vasiliy kept fighting in Stalingrad until January 1943, when he received another wound that nearly cost him his eyesight, but eventually made a full recovery. Promoted to lieutenant and awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union, Vasiliy ultimately achieved a remarkable 235 confirmed kills, including 11 enemy marksmen, making him one of the most successful snipers of the Second World War. But who was his nemesis, the enigmatic German sniper, Major Erwin König? Well, in reality, there was no such person and of such rank in the Wehrmacht at that time. Nor could he have possibly even reached Stalingrad all the way from Berlin to engage Zaitsev in a duel in the short time between the moment he became famous in mid-October to when the duel most certainly took place in early November. The reality is that Major König was likely a fabrication of the Soviet leadership, perhaps of Colonel Bachuk himself, who both introduced the idea and subsequently confirmed the identity of the German sniper. But eyewitness testimonies and German daily report on sniper activities confirm that a duel did take place, and it wouldn't be unheard of if the Germans put up a bounty on Zaitsev's head, considering he was all over the Soviet propaganda leaflets of the time. But the real identity of the man who tried to take him on remains something of a mystery. Based on the few surviving German records and the latest historical research published in Russia, it's perhaps most likely that Zaitsev's opponent was a Gefreiter Hermann Stoff, the ace sniper of the Wehrmacht's 295th Infantry Division, which fought at the Mamayev Kurgan at the time. His division, along with the entire 300,000-strong 6th Army, was completely destroyed in the Stalingrad pocket, with very few of those men ever making it back to Germany. What is known, though, is that up until his defeat and death somewhere in the city in November 1942, Corporal Stoff had achieved an impressive 103 confirmed kills. That said, ever since that famous bullet was fired somewhere near this spot, there has been speculation about its target, and today, multiple theories abound. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments. Regardless of the identity of the second man in that famous duel, the importance of snipers in the battle is undisputed. From August 1942 to February 1943 alone, on the whole Stalingrad front, 985 Soviet snipers claimed to have shot and killed up to 30,000 German soldiers in a truly titanic battle, and in doing so, forever cemented their place in the history of the Second World War. Thanks for watching. If, like us, you find the fighting on the Eastern Front fascinating, why not check out our podcast, World War II, Both Sides of the Wire, where our hosts, Professor Matthias Strone and Jesse Alexander, recently took a deep dive into the Battle of Stalingrad and the many myths associated with it. And if you'd like to help us to make more videos like this, check out our Patreon in the link below. That's all this time. We'll see you again soon.